So we have no particular disclosures other than my children don't know how to wear their clothing. So here's your clinical correlation, which is your patient comes in to clinic and you're a primary care doc and he says, you know, I posted a screenshot of my CT scan on Twitter and here's some questions my Twitter friends wanted me to ask you. And what's your response to that? Do you say, where did you get this? You're not authorized to see it. Do you say, get out of my office, you hacker? Do you say, this is not your scan, otherwise you would clearly be too sick to be here? Or do you say, Twitter is so last year, why aren't you on it? So you might take this with a sense of meditation and go, things are going to be fine, don't worry, it's just an image, or maybe you're freaking out inside. All right.
So here's what we'd like to cover in the next few minutes. Why would you want to do this? Why share radiology images with your patients? How did we at UCHealth do this and try it at home? We'll talk a little bit about bill details. What does it actually look like in real life? We surveyed patients prior to going live, and we'll share with you what patients think about this. We'll tell you a little bit about what's happened so far and where we plan to go with this next. So at last year's SimEpic user group, Paul Nagy, who many of you may know, stood up and said, hey, has anyone image-enabled MyChart for patient image viewing? And I thought, well, information transparency with patients is a good thing, right? We ought to be able to do this. We already have an embedded image link for doctors in Epic. Why not show patients their images as well? We do have an enterprise imaging viewer at UCHealth, which is the Philips Anywhere viewer, and no one uses it, so why not see if we can use it for that? So I came back and I said, hey, CT, want to show patients their images online?
Sure.
Cool. Hold my beer. So I waved my magical technical wand, which in translation means that our amazing gradient analysts and Whitney and Eric did their magic. CT held some governance discussions, which he'll talk about a bit. And barely a month later, we went live with a patient link in MyChart to the Radiology Imaging Viewer.
A month? Wow.
No, I'll do that later.
All right, so some of you just should know that we have a tradition of releasing test results and so forth to patients rather aggressively, and these are our settings. So we already, on MyChart, release test results, lab results, including HIV, STDs, and so forth, to patients immediately. The only exceptions to that now are some genetic tests, some broad panel genetic tests with long-term implications. Most are released immediately. Our pathology is released at a 14-day delay. Our problems, meds, and allergies are out there immediately. We are an open notes shop. All 600 clinics, 11 hospitals, and 21 emergency departments are all releasing doctors' progress notes to patients by default at the time of signing. And also, yes, hospital discharge notes. We're not inpatient daily notes. We're not open there yet. Radiology reports we already release immediately for plain film, ultrasound, and mammography. And complex imaging, CT, MR, and PET, we do delay 7 days in case of oncology diagnosis and so forth. And so the question is, what do we do with our radiology images? And we noodled on that for a while until we struck on the duh. You know, if we embed an image link, why don't we embed it on the radiology report that already has built-in delays, right? The ones that goes out immediately, send a link with the immediate report. The ones that are delayed 7 days, send the link with the delayed report. It's the big deal. Well, it turns out there is kind of a technical hurdle, which is that we think that some fraction of the time, patients will have simultaneous x-rays and complex imaging, right? Small gotcha there. And if you look on the Venn diagram, we believe we do about 1.2 million studies a year in our organization. The vast majority, 800,000, are inpatient or ED, where the nurse and the physician are sort of walking around while you're in their presence. And if you look at something, well, you can just pull someone inside and say, what does this mean? But the challenge is in the 400,000 that we do outpatient, where you do the test result, you go home, you're not going to see the doc for a while. You see the bubble for the CT, MR, and PET studies, and you see the bubble for plain films, and that intersection with the red arrow, we think, is something about 1% of those patients might have both a CAT scan and a plain film at the same time. So here's the gotcha, right? If someone very cleverly and probably most of you in this audience, would click through to your plain film report, get your image. The Radiology Viewer allows you to see all images. So you, oh look, there's CAT scan images in here. And you know, what fraction of the time, and of course our leadership thinks 100% of the time, people will complain that I see my CAT scan images, where the F is my report? And so we did the calculation and did a best case scenario, worst case scenario. We think about maybe 3 times a week if someone's really savvy and poking around, and we think maybe we get 3 phone calls a week. Gee, can we as an organization tolerate 3 phone calls a week about images? We sort of held our breath, crossed our fingers, and jumped. Our guiding principles for change, if you have not read this book and you're in this room and leading informatics projects, we actually have a book club among our informatics physicians, and they're very disappointed that they don't get to read about computers. They read about darn change management books. And this is by far the #1 most important one. I'll tell you that every project that we failed at, and I can show you my failure CV, it's a very large, long one, is a failure of doing one of these, not following one of these chapters. So you think about this, and this is on your slide. So how did we do this?
So I will say that, thank goodness, as always, we have Whitney and Eric, and neither CT nor I are particularly technical. I'll give you a very high-level overview of what we did. They'll be available either during or after the presentation if there are more technical issues. So we used the Subi link, the standard URL-based integration link, which is in MyChart. We put it in MyChart, and it's identical to what's on the image tab in the Epic chart. Just to note, this is not the same as Epic's JPEG imaging viewing tool. This is a DICOM Viewer. Sean Bina, of course, 5 seconds before the talk, tells me that Share Everywhere has embedded viewing as well. And I'm sure they'll be sharing more with you about that. We created a generic user ID to authenticate the patient, and it was created just for this application. And these are some of the build details that I'm not intimately familiar with. And we granted the patient image viewing permission only, and they can only view their own images. So we firewalled anybody else's images. We do have an appendix at the end, and it'll be on the slide deck that's shared on the user web eventually. So here's what things look like in the image tab in the standard Epic chart. And the red arrow points to the existing Subi link where providers can click and go out to, in this case, in our case, the Philips enterprise version of the Radiology Viewer, which is different from the viewer we enabled for MyChart. So what does it look like in real life? You've seen a slide of this before, but on MyChart, if you go to your test results and you have had imaging studies done, they'll be denoted by the chest skeleton, yay chest. And when you click on that, you're taken to our radiology report, which now has the click here to view full resolution images, which is a Subi link. And I will point out that on all radiology reports at UCHealth, we also embed verbiage, as you see here. If you're a healthcare provider, it provides a phone number to call the radiologist if you have questions. If you're a patient, you're instructed to call your provider. The savvy patient obviously sees the phone number and could potentially call us. We could theoretically be then facing a barrage of phone calls. We do about 8,000 studies a week, and in general we get at most 2 or 3 calls about the reports. So it's really not intrusive, and we welcome the calls. Our ordering providers in general ask that we put the second line in, and, but we're happy to answer phone calls from patients, and it's not terribly intrusive. So when you click on the link, this is what the viewer looks like. It opens the image set for the study you have selected. In this case, 3 views of a hand. It also provides in tabs on the bottom all the other studies that you've had, all the other imaging studies that you've had, and you can navigate quite simply back and forth. This is not, however, the most patient-friendly viewer, and I think we had a question earlier. It is the viewer we have right now. We are working on other solutions for potentially a more patient-friendly viewer. Easy enough to navigate around a set of 3 cling films. A set of 42 MR series can be a little more complex for patients. And that is the potentially problematic embedded report link. And as CT mentioned, if patients had a CT and MR on the same day, an X-ray and a CT, X-ray results are released immediately, CTs and MRs and PETs at 7 days. In addition, if I've ever had an X-ray study, because we loaded all studies back in perpetuity, I could go to one of my old ones, get into the viewer, and potentially see the report today for a CT I had, and I'm not supposed to see it for a week. So we disabled that. And if you try to click on it, you get this message saying report viewing is not authorized.
So what do patients think about this? We actually performed a pre-survey. We actually have a UCHealth Insights community, 686 members of our region. Some are patients, but most are members of the public who are interested in what we're doing. And so we got about 105 responses, about a 15% response rate, which apparently in the industry of voice of the patient and insights and community is pretty typical. This is what we heard. Overall, patients like the idea of online access. They're rated very highly. Key benefits show increased trust in their physician, convenience and being able to share for a second opinion, increased understanding, heightened sense of control. MyChart is mine. Most patients have no concerns, but a few have worries that it might be confusing, that the images would not be secure, or that the wrong images would be in their chart. You see on the right, 87% of patients like the idea. Nearly all patients want to see images in their portal. 90% would like to see the images. 35% say they would better understand the report. 29% want to save their images and share them with other doctors. 24% want to see them purely out of curiosity. The 10% who don't like it, don't see a need, and would rather discuss it in person. Quote, the report of the findings is all I need. I wouldn't know what I was looking at if I saw the images. Or, I think seeing the image without a doctor can cause more anxiety in some people. But there are some positive quotes. It would be interesting to see how the images changed as I went through my chemotherapy. I can see what the doctor's describing in his written report. Radiology reports and images work together to inform the patient. We actually had to go through this with our community because not everyone in the community understands that we already, and have for the past 10 years, shared radiology reports with our patients. They talk about wanting to match the findings with what is present in the images. I feel like this would be an added layer of taking control of my health. The image improves the credibility of the report, and I'd like to see the images while reading the report. I'm able to see what's going on. So 92% of the community thinks that the report is important, 78% think the images are also important. Transparency with radiology images would improve patients' relationship with their doctor. In the orange circle, you see that 71% feel like they would be reassured, that they would trust their doctors more, 64%. And on top of that, more than 70% feel like they would better understand their medical condition, feel more in control, better follow doctors' recommendations. And it's below 10% where you talk about finding errors in my reports, or worrying more, or feeling confused and having a lot of questions. If given access, patients would save a copy of images and share them with their PCP. I would have the opportunity to see the images myself and better understand the issue and discussing it with my doctor. And here's the quote, getting a CD copy of your images and driving them or mailing them to your doctor is so difficult right now. And just to add to that, right, as we purchase new PCs, none of them have CD drives. So even when patients go, look, I went through all the trouble of bringing you this CD, and you go, I can't do anything with this. I don't have a drive in my office. Can you now drive this to our medical records radiology department, have them scan it in, and maybe in a couple of days I can view it on our network? Really kind of a troublesome issue. So which of the following would you like to do with your images if you had access to them online? 80% share with PCP, 78% save a copy, 63% second opinion, and oh, I love this one. 4% social media. Wow. Patients most want to discuss their radiology images with their ordering doctor. Potential concern is that it may cause confusion if the doctor isn't available to discuss the image with you right away. So our pre-survey conclusions might lead you to the following recommendations. Maybe consider prior to implementing this that RAD reports and images should be viewable side by side. Wouldn't that be nice? You see in our current process, you get one or you get the other. Patient concerns about the security. Maybe we would provide detailed explanation in a patient-friendly viewer that talks about, we work really hard to keep your images secure. Maybe we could do that. Or maybe you could reserve extra doctor time, maybe among the radiologists or among the physicians for patient Q&A. They might need extra time. Or patients might be expected to save and share the images, and maybe implementing without this functionality would cause some frustration. So did we do any of these things? No, did not. No. Okay, what's happened so far?
So how have things gone? Did the trumpet blow and the walls come down? Did radiology receptionists quit en masse? Did anxious, angry patients storm our gates? Are CT and I taking early retirement? We can only hope. Is this XGM presentation our last job for UCHealth? So we went from 0 to 60 really quickly. So at the end of August, when we went live, obviously we had no patient views, and we are averaging 22,000 patient views, and that was with 0 marketing. We sent out a little blurb to physicians through our usual channels to make sure they knew this was coming. There was personal contact that went on, but that was it. So pretty impressive use with very little effort on our part. We have had 0 complaints about this. So I mentioned that we generally get 2 or 3 calls about reports. That volume hasn't changed one bit, and we've heard no negative feedback at all. So at least for this week, CT and I are not looking at it.
Okay, so where are we going with this next? We anticipate doing a post-survey very similar to our pre-survey, and you can look at the details in the slides if you'd like, talking about worry, confusion, and reassurance, and so forth. And here's some lessons learned. Patients viewing radiology images has resulted in essentially 0 patient or provider complaints in the last 8 months. Generally, I'm the first one to hear when someone's unhappy with anything, either on the patient side or on the provider side, and constantly I'm talking to medical directors and I'm getting essentially no comments back. And we've seen over 160,000 studies viewed by patients. Anecdotally, patients love it. We go to our PFAC, our Patient Family Advisory Council, and we ask who's clicked on their images, and almost everyone has, and we love it, and it's kind of cool. It's not technically hard to do, as you saw. Our image viewer does not yet work on mobile. We're leaning on our vendor pretty hard to try to get to that point. And our challenge is really getting permission to survey patients. And if any of you have been successful at turning your online patients into a voice of the patient community in your organization, I would love to talk to you. As with many organizations, we are a sea of no's, 1,000 points of no, as we say in our governance meetings. And a marketing committee says, well, that's not our brand, we can't possibly. Or clinical leadership is worried about it, or our PFAC approval process. So how do we survey our patients on process improvement tools like this? And if you have insights and ways that you're doing it well, I would love to talk with you. Our next steps, we're looking to develop and deploy a mobile viewer for our patients. We're going to do post-intervention surveys in the near future, and then we're looking for patients' ability to store and download images from the portal directly.
And I should mention that as of yesterday, we use Nuance PowerShare as our image sharing platform, and that they have reached out to us that we think we're on the verge of being able to enable MyChart, which will allow uploading and downloading and potentially do away with the CD conundrum. And I would venture to guess that the next time we speak to you, more than 4% of people will have shared on social media. That's just
Which leads us back to our clinical correlation. If we post a screenshot, what is your answer? And maybe it's none of these, it's actually, yeah, you should be on Pinterest. That's where the images are. And that's what we have for you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've definitely got questions and taking advantage of the. So Peter, I just want to say it's day 2. You wore a tie again today.
Yeah.
You took it off yesterday, but you put it back on today.
Not taking it off.
Okay. All right. Okay.
No chance.
And
my boss is here.
Also, with the initials of CT and you work in radiology, I mean, there you go. All right. So I have some security questions. So you have people hitting your image servers from their home PCs. I see that you're passing generic credentials. Who am I looking at for this question? Is this, yeah. So I see you're passing generic credentials. And so I'm assuming that's Active Directory driven at that point to get the correct viewer.
So the credentials only authenticate into the Philips Viewer.
Okay.
So it's only credentials for that. It's just
Okay.
created simply in that system.
Okay.
Similar to what a lot of organizations do for even just regular fax viewing or for Epicure Link.
Okay.
Where you don't necessarily need to have an account for every single person.
Right.
You just use one.
So we are using generic, we have Visage, so we're using generic credentials with Epicure Link. So we're part of the way. In fact, I think my SVP may have talked to one of you two already, Hal Baker from Wellspan. So we're part of the way there. I'm really concerned about the security piece. Did you have to set up some DMV stuff?
So that had already been set up for Link.
Okay.
And we just
So
backed up.
you're just leveraging links?
Yeah,
That's very
exactly.
nice.
We had set up a separate URL with Philips that already,
Okay.
that was actually even before I joined UCHealth a few years ago, that was already
Okay.
set up.
So that's
Yeah.
perfect segue to my next question. It's a totally web-based viewer. It's not a client anyway.
Correct.
That fourth question, sorry. So you say you're not mobile, but potentially, does that link fire open in like Safari or whatever Android uses?
So that particular viewer requires ActiveX components, which is why it doesn't work on mobile.
Oh, makes sense. Yep.
But it does open in just Safari or Chrome or whatever.
If you're on your
the
PC,
PC.
or iMac, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and as I alluded to, is not particularly patient-friendly to begin with, and if you try to cram that onto a mobile device,
Yeah.
it's not facile. We at
Okay.
UCHealth are actually investigating new PACS architectures, and one of the top 5 must-haves will be either with that particular vendor or with multiple vendors and mobile friendly.
Okay. Fantastic work, by the way, thank you. And you got my big boss's ears, so now I have more work to do. Thank you so much.
Hey, Peter, one quick clarification. So, image sharing, being able to click on the image link works through Share Everywhere. Image sharing works through Share Everywhere, not through Care Everywhere.
I said share.
You did say Share,
Yeah,
okay.
but I mumbled probably. So.
Okay, I thought I heard you say Care
No,
Everywhere.
Care.
So, in Share Everywhere, what that allows you to do as a patient is to basically send an email to someone. They can then access your record as long as they know your date of birth. And from there, they can see all of your test results, including your radiology results, and they can click on the PACS link and then be able to open up the images. So essentially now we have the ability for patients anywhere, anytime to allow people to get access to the images that have been provided to them.
My question is, which PACS are you guys using right now? What viewer is open?
So we're on Philips IntelliSpace, and that's the Philips Anywhere viewer that you saw.
Hi, Joe Costa from the University of Florida. CTU helped me about 100 years ago before we transferred from Allscripts to Epic, and it's nice. So we have very resistant radiologists at my institution, and trying to release information to MyChart is a hurdle, and this has loaded me with a lot of ammunition to go back with. I really appreciate what you guys have presented. I have a policy question though. Do you delay the result release by any certain period of time? You can imagine patients who are unaware of a tumor would be all over that phone line if you didn't build in a delay. You may have said it earlier and I was a little late.
Yeah, let me go back. Yes, we do have a set of rules. Our radiology rules is basically plain films go immediately. Complex imaging, CT, MR, and PET are
7 days.
7 days.
Yeah.
7 days. We are.
Right, so plain film, almost all ultrasound and mammo go immediately, and the others go at 7 days, although CT and I are engaged in a pushing the rock up the mountain to try to shorten that. CT is a pioneer in open notes, and so we have the same philosophy, he and I, and the same philosophy about results release. As you alluded to, the biggest pushback we get, and there's certainly validity to it, are from the oncologists and some of the neuroscience physicians about potentially catastrophic changes in imaging that they would like to be able to talk to their patients about.
Thank you. We released our notes and the world kept spinning. It was amazing.
Yeah.
About that.
I will say also philosophically, I think this is a train that's moving and that patient advocates will insist on this, and at some point we will be forced.
I'll say that this has been about 7-8 years ago when we first started doing PET scans, right? We wrote embargo rules for CT, MR. We didn't have to write a rule for a PET scan. So the first PET scan went through immediately, and we did that for a couple of months until an abnormal, right, multiple meds to the brain in the oncology service on a Friday. Oncologist leaves Friday afternoon for an out-of-town meeting. Saturday, patient sees the image, calls up the on-call doctor. What is going on? How did you hack into our system? A lot of unhappiness, and it was a big kerfuffle that the oncology center was saying, turn the whole darn thing off. This is a terrible idea. See what you did to this patient. And that's not a good outcome. We then put them on the 7-day delay that everyone else is on, and it's been a non-issue since then. Our job now is to try to shrink 7 days to can we get it down to 4. I know the best practice, some organizations are down to 2. I think I can maybe get to 4 before we retire, maybe after we retire. But that's the idea. We're trying to get fired. But I'm happy to talk to you. Yes.
Faith Lancaster, Montage Health. I heard you say that you're on the verge of being able to have your patients download the images, which is awesome. I also heard you say uploading. So are you thinking about leveraging that for uploading priors?
Absolutely. Yeah, the whole concept is, and CT and our CIO, Steve Hess, are incredibly driven about patient access and the digital patient experience. Now I can do my plug. So let me answer your question first, and the answer is yes, because we want patients to be able to do both of those things. Sharing on social media wasn't something really on our mind, but yes. But be able to upload, get their priors, because they often have them. They don't have to drive to the file room ahead of time. We don't have to be handling CDs, whatever else we're handling, so absolutely.
Okay, great. I just had one more follow-up. Are you guys leveraging that to get people to sign up for MyChart when they call about getting a CD or maybe giving you a prior?
Well, we actually are. So we have these nice little cards that are by our schedulers and by our image library people. And we have them all over the department, so we take every opportunity the schedulers do to say, hey, by the way, why don't you sign up for MyChart? And you might know our penetrance now in MyChart.
Our clinic with the highest sign-up rate is 88%. System-wide, we're running, well, Epic stats show us lower, but we think we're 50 to 60% of our population.
Okay, great, thanks.
So my quick plug is that for those of you who are interested or are planning to come to SIM, which is at the end of June, it's at the fabulous new Gaylord Rockies, which is sort of kind of almost near Denver. It's a fantastic meeting, and the day before the meeting, which is Tuesday, June 25th from 1 to 3 p.m., we run a SIM Epic user group, and we'll be joined by Leah and Conan and Scott, and we have a really good program plan. It's a user-run agenda. We sandwich the Epic folks telling us some more about what's new and getting some development feedback with presentations from our users about things that they're doing in Epic.
What is SIM?
Problems. It's a really collaborative interchange between us and the Epic folks. So it is something you haven't seen before, but if you happen to be coming or are interested in coming, check out SIM website.
I want to follow up with that. Monica Little, New Hanover Regional Medical Center. You mentioned PowerShare.
Yeah.
So that's what you're going to leverage. They're going to allow patients to create their own accounts in PowerShare to be able to upload or download those images.
That's what we're told.
Are you the first to do that, or is PowerShare doing that with
I
other
don't know.
facilities? You don't know.
We like to believe we're the first that does everything, but usually we because for example, there are others who have image enabled their portals. It happened not to be Epic, but Mayo has done it. Some other, the VA has done it. There's others who have done it. We should give credit. So I don't know.
I have a question. Hi, Natalie from Beaumont. We have Philips Fax, we have the Subi Link. We aren't doing any of this yet, but we definitely have our issues. I'm curious what your PACS buy-in was with turnarounds, with images being in exceptions, and we get a lot of problem tickets that come our way with the text and the users not being able to get the images out of the exceptions or get unsuccessfully put them on the wrong patient. So I'm wondering if you guys had to, what kind of buy-in you got from them, and if you're experiencing issues with any of that piece of this.
I'll answer the second part first, which is to my knowledge, we're not experiencing any issues. You know, as CT indicated, I would be pretty surprised if we didn't hear within 2 seconds if the patient figured out they were the wrong images. I hear what you're saying, but to my knowledge, we haven't.
So we're just special?
No.
Hey, it's a good possibility.
No. Back to the first part. I'm talking about this workflow. We have exactly the same images in our standard workflow. But our PACS team are also amazing, and they were really excited about this as well. And so it has not been an issue for us.
So you're lucky. Okay.
Yeah. Lucky in a lot of ways.
Hi, Sue Schultz from Advocate of Verona Health. A couple of operation questions. You talked a couple of times about saving, the patient being able to save the images. Do you have any conflict with your HIM policies around access and downloading of that information? And if not, does it feed back into the release of Information Navigator today?
Yeah.
Next question.
So, we had a similar conversation with Open Notes, right? HIM going, where's the release from the patient saying they're going to take the copy home with them? And our response is, it's the patient taking their own stuff. So when the patient asks for an audit of who we released it to, we're not going to tell them, well, remember, 2 weeks ago, you asked me for the report? So this is in the same bucket of patient self-access. It's not like they're releasing it to third parties. They're releasing it to the first party. So we're not finding that.
But you're able to track that in the system when they access the image?
Yes.
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 And then the follow-up question, you mentioned mammography results released immediately, including by red zeros?
I don't know. I'm not a breast imager, so probably not.
Okay.
Whitney, do you know that?
Eric.
Eric knows that. Good.
Yeah, we do have delays set up based
Yeah.
on your standard sort of like assessments and severity.
Oh, because in
Yeah.
our experience has been they can't, it's an all or nothing. They are telling us they can't hold back by red zeros, that it's everything.
We can chat afterwards.
Just real quick, I feel like I know the answer. I'm Amber Kane from Mercy Health. If I'm a proxy for somebody else in my portal, am I still able to view those images as well? Like children?
Yes.
I figured so.
Yes.
Yeah, anybody with the login to your portal. So be careful to do your
So
Yeah.
our proxies have full access to our patient's report, with the exception that in our adolescents, parent proxies of children have full access until, I think we borrowed our Children's Colorado colleagues' rule, birthday age 14. Oh gosh, it's either birthday age 13 or birthday age 14. Parents access, proxy access turns into messaging only, and chart access goes away. And so that's our adolescent sort of accommodation, but everything else is full BP.
Kelly with Integris. Any pushback from cardiology in that the general public might see all imaging as one and hey, I can see my x-rays, but I can't see my echocardiogram because cardiology hasn't done.
Funny you should ask that. And that's kind of an OS moment here, but cardiology images are viewable on our timeline. So we've merged into a single eyeball. So all the cardiology images are there. The reports are not there. We haven't enabled that anyway. We've disabled the report viewing, but they can see them. We haven't heard, and as you probably alluded to, the cardiologists would definitely let me know if they were unhappy. So. And ultimately, we intend for our enterprise imaging viewing platform to include everything, path, you name it. So the potential here to have a single, we created our IT platform so that we'd have a single point of access for referring providers, eventually to all images through Epic, and we're planning to do the same thing.